He'll make a throw over to first.
We now return to the final score.
Final score.
Here's Matt Levine.
And welcome back. It is the final score on AM 1400 WSTC 1350 WNLK on this Saturday afternoon right here on the final score. I want to talk to you about local sports and want to thank the guests that have been on the program thus far and get to our guest right now who's awaiting on deck. John Mariano of Trinity Catholic Boys Basketball and Greg Rakestraw of ESPN 950 AM in Indianapolis, Indiana. And to finish off the hat trick today of guests, we welcome in Jim Bouton, who joins us here on the final score, former Yankee great as a pitcher and also the author of several hit books, including Ball 4. And we welcome him into the program. And Jim, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Matt. Nice to be here.
Great to have you aboard. First off, you're a guest that a lot of people, when I'm telling about Jim Bouton's coming on the show this week, everyone has an opinion for what you're known for. So I guess you're a man of many different hats, and you've had such an interesting career to this point. I know you're also doing something that looks absolutely, very cool, the Vintage Baseball World Series. Tell us about your involvement in that, the VBBF, as you call it. Tell us all about that and what you're hoping to do maybe to bring that to the Fairfield County area.
Well, vintage baseball, for people who are not familiar with it, is baseball played by 19th century rules, uniforms, and equipment. So guys in baggy uniforms with fat-handle bats swinging at lemon peel stitch balls that have to be caught with little tiny gardening gloves. It's a great sport. It's a lot of fun. Because the gloves are so small, the players have to make the play. The equipment can't. And so a one-handed catch in the outfield is a pretty spectacular-looking thing. Fans love it because it's a feeling, a step back in time. They wear bowler hats and flowered hats to the ballparks. Frequently, they'll play old music from the 1800s. And so it's an interesting experience. It's called the gentleman's game also. It's a game of manners. There's only one umpire. He must always be addressed as sir.
Wow.
So it's a nice spectacle. And I got involved with vintage baseball a couple of years ago, staging a vintage baseball game event up in Pittsfield, Massachusetts at Wacona Park, and we drew 5,000 people to the ballpark, and ESPN Classic televised the game. It's a great new sport. It's growing around the country. There are about 220, 230 teams now playing baseball in 32 different states. And what I'd like to do is to stage a vintage baseball World Series in Stamford, Connecticut. If we can do it, if we can get the support of the business community, we're trying to sell sponsorships, title sponsor, and also billboards. The billboards, by the way, are going to be very old-fashioned billboards.
Okay.
They're going to be vertical pine boards, and the logos will be take a modern logo, and then we'll vintagize it, make it look old-fashioned like it was in the 1800s. And so the idea is to take Cubetta Stadium and sort of make it look like an old movie set.
It looks that would be the perfect venue to do that with, and that's a great place to play baseball. And definitely, I'm hoping it comes to town because I definitely want to check it out. I have seen it before on ESPN, and it draws you in, and you're like, wow, this is so funky. I got to keep on watching some more. I guess the website is vbba.org.
No,
okay.
That's not. No,
it's something else. I'm looking in a.
If you need to go to the vintage, our website, it's vintagefederation.com. So the word vintage and federation, it's one word, vintagefederation.com.
Excellent. Again, and we're joined here by Jim Bouton on the final score on AM 1400 WSTC 1350 WNLK. I'm Matt Levine from 1230 to 2. Talk local sports with you each and every Saturday. WSTC WNLK.com. I was reading in the paper this morning, and I thought of you coming up on the show that the passing of Hank Bauer happened this morning or overnight. Could you tell us a little bit about Hank Bauer? I'm sure many a time you cross paths with him, right?
Yeah, mostly on Old Timers Day. By the time I got up to the big leagues with the Yankees, which was 1962, Hank had been retired for several years, but he was always there on Old Timers Day. He's a great legend. He always had to talk tough like this, And I always thought he was sort of pretending to be a gruff guy, but no, that was his natural voice. He was always a fixture at the Old Timers games. I liked Hank sitting there. I can still see him now sitting there before the games in his baseball underwear, having a cup of coffee, a little paper cup of coffee, sitting next to Moose Scour, and they were old buddies. As a matter of fact, they were buddies right up until Hank passed away, they used to join together in a Hank and Moose golf tournaments, raising money for charities. And he was just a great guy. Hank played right field for the Yankees in the old days,
Sure.
when Mickey Mantle was at his peak in the late 50s.
And again, Jim Bouton, the guest here on the Final Score. Pleasure to have him aboard. I'm Matt Levine. It's AM 1400 WSTC, 1350 WNLK on the AM dial side of things here online. It's WSTC.WNLK.com. We go to 2 o'clock. I wanted to ask you, Jim, what is it that you'd want to be known best for? Because, in Big League Chew, which I always enjoyed, the dentists don't like it. My dentist is my uncle, so I don't think he's a big fan of Big League Chew, but I was growing up. And
why not? It brings dentists a lot of business. You'd think they'd love Big League Chew.
That's true. But I guess, being the uncle in him, he's, he wants to see my teeth good. But I enjoyed Big League Chew because it made you feel like, a big leaguer when you were a kid playing baseball, which I did plenty of. And you almost forget. I'm like, Jim Bouton found that, and you're an author. You're a great baseball player. Now you're involved with the vintage baseball. What is it that you like to be recognized as when you introduce yourself? How do you do that, and what do you want people to think? Well-rounded guy, or is it one specific thing that you want to be remembered for?
Well, I never really give that much thought. I don't focus on the past. I'm focused on the future. I guess when I'm speaking to little leaguers and 12-year-olds, in order to get their attention, I say, I'm the guy that invented Big League Chew, because playing for the Yankees or writing a book doesn't mean anything to those kids. So I guess it depends on the age of the person that I'm speaking to. Right now, I'd like to be known as the guy who did something, took vintage baseball to the next level.
And, of course, we're speaking with Jim Bouton on the Final Score live local radio, Fairfield County Sports Talk on Saturdays, 12:30 to 2, WSTC.WNLK.com on the radio. If you don't know where you're tuned into, I'll tell you, 1400 or 1350. If both come in, then we're better for it. Ball 4, I was born in 1973, so I wasn't around when it came out, but I can ask the man who created the book. I've heard so much about it, had a chance to read it when I was in high school. Great book, and definitely the social significance behind it is maybe what made it so popular. In today's age, if you released Ball 4, would it float? Would it be a big deal?
Well, I don't know. I think it was considered very controversial at the time, but really it's more of a loving and inside look at baseball, showing the players to be very interesting characters. And so I think anytime anybody writes a book that gets deep into a culture and is revealing of the characters, and if the characters are interesting people, I think it would be a good book at any time. I'd like to read a book like that about the Congress, for example, at the White House. I'd like to see how things are really, how our country is really run. An insider book like that would be, I think, would be helpful to people. And I'm really glad I wrote Ball 4 because it taught me to pay attention to what people were saying and doing, and so I listened. I became a very much better listener and an observer, and I wrote all that stuff down. And if I hadn't written it down, I would have forgotten most of it. I would say probably 95% of my baseball memories are centered on the 1 year that I kept this diary. So, even if nobody read the book, I'm glad I have it from my own memories.
And we're glad we have it, too, to read it at any time. And you read a follow-up you've written, too, right? Foul Ball?
Well, yeah. Foul Ball is a book I wrote 2 years ago about a failed attempt to to restore an old ballpark in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, Wacona Park. And so it's a daily diary of what it was like battling the local politics. And my partner and I had put a bunch of investors together. We were going to put $1 million into a city-owned ballpark for the benefit of the people of the community. And you would think that, any community would love to have something
Absolutely.
like that. We weren't looking to own it.
Mm-hmm.
We were just looking to fix it
benefit
up
the community.
and play baseball games there. But the people that run the city, who are not the politicians,
Mm-hmm.
but the local bank, the law firm, and the newspaper, and the city's largest employer, General Electric, wanted to build a new baseball stadium on a site that was owned by the newspaper. And our plan to restore Wacona Park would have put a stake in the heart of a new ballpark.
All right.
And so in order to keep the new stadium dream alive, they had to kill our plan, which is what they did.
And again, Jim Bouton, the guest here on the Final Score, kind enough to join us as we speak with him, the author of Ball 4, creator of Big League Chew. Also has a project going on, which he works on with the Vintage Baseball Federation. We've spoken about that and some of his time with the Yankees. A great career for you with the Yanks, 21-7 back in 1963. Do you look out today in today's game? And first off, a two-part question here. Any pitchers remind you of yourself that you see in today's game? And secondly, talk about pitching in today's game. Of course, you see the differences now. You always hear the stories about pitch counts and pitchers being basically babied. So again, anyone remind you of yourself in today's game and pitching today? Is it the same as it used to be? Is it for the better maybe that they're so-called babied? Do you see that philosophy into play today? Talk about it.
Yeah, I think that they're much smarter with the way they handle pitchers. Back in the 60s when I was pitching for the Yankees, we used to pitch every 4 days, 3 days rest, and then we would always go as far as we could go into the game. So pitching on 4 days rest, I ended up pitching something like 270 innings one year. Wow. I had 11 complete games. Today, entire teams don't have 11 complete games, but looking back on it, that was probably the reason why I burned myself out. I had a sore arm in 1965, and it never really came back. And I think if they had taken better care of me, and if I had taken better care of myself, in terms of knowing that I shouldn't be pitching that much, I might have had a longer career. So I think they're not so much babying the players today as they're just taking care of their investments. I remember saying to my roommate, my old roommate Gary Bell, I said, today's players are treated like thoroughbred horses. He said, yeah, we were treated like farm animals.
Interesting. And is there one pitcher that you see again that reminds you of yourself?
No. I was today they're all 6'4", and I was a shade under 6 feet. So I don't compare with any of them in terms of size. I also had a very herky-jerky overhand motion. I don't see anybody with that kind of a motion today. And I had a straight overhand curveball, an old-fashioned drop, they call it. But you don't see that in baseball anymore either, because they don't teach it at Little League. They don't let kids throw curveballs. And by the way, any of you Little League fathers out there, kids out there, I know that they say, they don't want the kids to throw curveballs because they're going to hurt their arms. But if they're not throwing curveballs by the time they're 10, 11, and 12, they're never going to learn how to throw a curveball properly, at least not at the major league level. Learning to throw a curveball or a knuckleball is like learning to play a musical instrument. If you're not playing the musical instrument, the violin or whatever, by the time you're 10 or 11, you're never going to play in a symphony orchestra. And it's the same with baseball. If you want to learn how to throw a curveball and a knuckleball, you better be throwing it when you're a kid. And to the answer of, what if they get a sore arm? Or aren't they going to get sore arms? My answer to that is, if they're lucky, they'll have 500 sore arms, just like me and most of the guys who get to the big leagues. Along the way, you're going to get sore arms. And if you want to will a perfect arm to science, then don't throw curveballs. But if you want a shot at the big leagues, they should start throwing curveballs when they're 10.
That's a good spin on it. Absolutely. Again, Jim Bouton joining us here on the Final Score. Matt Levine, AM 1400 WSTC, 1350 WNLK on the AM dial. Live local sports talk here in Fairfield County from 12:30 to 2 o'clock. They're going to build a new Yankee Stadium in 2008. Personally, I guess when they build it, Jim, I'm talking about it now like they shouldn't do, but when they build it, I'm going to be the first guy to go out there and, wait in line to go see it. But the current Yankee Stadium, the old Yankee Stadium, my favorite place to be, a temple for baseball fans, a great place. What was your favorite memory in Yankee Stadium as we get ready for the new Yankee Stadium in 2008?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say something just to on the notion of new Yankee Stadium. I think it's outrageous that the city of New York should be donating property and also about $250 million worth of infrastructure, maybe $500 million of infrastructure to benefit a few wealthy individuals, which is the owner of the ball club and the players who are playing there. When you have schools in New York City, they're taking classrooms in stairwells. They don't have enough books. They don't have enough teachers. Class sizes are too large. They don't have enough, material. After-school sports are being cut back, and yet they can spend all of this money on a stadium that's not needed, and benefit a handful of people. It's a national disgrace, this business of new stadiums around the country at the expense of schools, hospitals, fire departments. And so I'm just completely dead set against it. That's just from a monetary, social point of view.
Sure.
But from a historical point of view, to tear down a ballpark and move it across the street. Imagine tearing down St. Patrick's Cathedral and building one across the street because the rectory will be nicer, or you'll have I mean, just ridiculous. But what can you do? The people aren't calling the shots. Decisions like these are not made at the ballot box. If they were, as Rudy Giuliani said when it was asked why people shouldn't be allowed to vote on this, he said because they would vote against it. So these are not democratic choices. We don't really have a democracy. The government is run by a handful of powerful people who are essentially elected through the money that they get from the large corporations. That's really who's making the decisions in these cities. And politicians know that they don't need to follow the popular will because they can get enough money from their donors and their backers, and they can convince 60% of the people that their position is correct by the money that they've got that they can put into advertising, and so it's just not a good situation, and that's why we have Yankee Stadium gets torn down and a new one built across the street. What are they going to call the? They're going to put a parking lot where the old stadium is. I guess they're going to call it the parking lot that Ruth built.
Something like that, The worst to me, Jim, and I'm crossing my fingers to baseball gods that it doesn't become Metropolitan Insurance, Yankee Stadium and Metropolitan Insurance Park, whatever it is. You don't put a corporate tag on it. I'm just hoping that doesn't come. Are
they going to do that?
No, I'm just saying I hope it doesn't happen. I couldn't see it with the Yankees, but you never know in this day and age. Everyone's got their ballpark, Bank One ballpark. Everyone's got a corporate logo on it, and they get, a couple $100 million to get that name on there forever, or until they want to take it off, until Enron goes down, and you get a scandal, then it becomes Minute Maid Park out in Houston. How many
you
games?
Asked about my favorite memory, so let me just talk
Sure.
about that. I loved Yankee Stadium was an awesome place to be. When I was a kid growing up in New Jersey, I was a Giants fan, so I would always go to the Polo Grounds. My first time in Yankee Stadium was as a player. I remember when they had a practice before opening day in 1962, or was it maybe the day before that? A couple of days before opening day, or the day before, they called for a practice at 1:00, and I was so nervous and excited. I got up in the morning, and I drove the car, and I was there about 8:00 in the morning. The only person in the stadium was the clubhouse man, Pete Sheehy.
Sure.
I went down to the clubhouse because I wanted to see what the Yankee clubhouse looked like. I walked in there, and it was marvelous. It was this big room underneath the stands. You could see all the pipes and the bottoms of the girders and everything, but it was all painted a sort of a gray-green, including carpet, wall-to-wall carpeting, and it was quiet in there, and huge walk-in locker stalls that you close. The uniforms were hanging in with military precision. A whole rows of lockers all around this room. It's like visiting a showroom for very expensive furniture. And here were all these uniforms lined up with military precision. There was a stool in everybody's locker. I just couldn't believe it. I walked over to my locker, and I saw my uniform number hanging there. And of course, I had to try it on to see if it fit. And then I went over by the mirror and looked at myself, and I said, "I wonder what it's like in the dugout." So I walked out and sat in the dugout for a few minutes, and then I said, "I wonder what it's like on the mound." So I walked out to the mound. This is about 8:30 in the morning, all by myself out there, just me and the pigeons, and a train rumbling by in right field, and I'm looking into home plate to see what it would be like. And of course, you look up and you see these stands, 3 tiers of stands, and it's like the Roman Colosseum a little bit. But it was really exciting to that moment. I don't think I'll ever forget it.
Absolutely. And you know what the problem is? I got to get going here, but I wish I can have you in studio anytime you want or on the telephone. We can talk forever. You're a great guy. You're doing great things, and a pleasure to share some of your Saturday with me. The Vintage Baseball World Series, I'm all for it. Bring it to Stanford. I'd love to come out. I'll wear some vintage clothes. If you need a play-by-play announcer, I'll do it for you.
Great. Well, they didn't have play-by-play announcers. What we'll do is we'll give you a megaphone.
Okay.
And you can be on the sidelines and you can announce the batters, because that's what they did in the 1800s. But we're not going to do it unless we have the support of the business community. So we need to have folks step forward and get behind the Vintage Baseball World Series if it's going to be in Stanford.
I'm all for it. So anything I can do to help the cause, please drop me a line. You have a wonderful weekend. Thank you, and continued much success in whatever endeavor you put your heart into. And anytime, come on the Final Score, Jim. Have a great day.
Okay, you got my number, Matt. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Bye.
Okay, again, as we hear from Jim Bouton right there, the former Yankee great, author as well. He's involved in the Vintage Baseball World Series, as we talked about it here on the Final Score. I'm way behind in commercials. Let's roll them. We'll come back with final thoughts on the Final Score right after this.